On a quiet afternoon on the streets of Los Angeles, Jason Statham and his wife Emily Walker were walking their two dogs. However, as they passed a gas station, the two motorcycle racers began harassing and taunting their dogs. The offensive words and rude attitude of the riders not only made the atmosphere tense, but also made Jason and Emily Walker feel uncomfortable. The incident became even more serious when one of the riders even mocked their tiny dogs, calling them mop brooms. The story seems like a minor harassment, but it quickly escalates into a tense situation. When he walked out of the house with his wife and two small dogs, Jason Statham couldn't help but feel a little worried, even though he was wearing simple clothes and trying to keep an idyllic image. This action of his is not only an ordinary walk, but also an attempt to avoid public attention, which he always feels uncomfortable every time he goes out. Even though he lives in a relatively quiet area, Jason can't help but think about what might happen if someone recognizes him. He knows full well that not everyone can keep calm when meeting a famous star, and attention can make things complicated. Although his wife, Emily Walker, tried to reassure and convince him that with this casual outfit, no one would recognize them, Jason still couldn't let go of the feeling of insecurity in his heart. He glanced around, observing the passers-by and the surrounding shops, always keeping a certain distance from strangers. He knew that as long as someone noticed, the whole seemingly ordinary walk would turn into a public event that he didn't want. Jason didn't want to attract too much attention, but a part of him felt as if he couldn't escape the shadow of fame. As Emily Walker continued to walk beside him, Jason tried to let his mood relax a little, but the thought of the possibility of being identified was always in his mind. Although he tried to appear calm, there was a hint of tension in his eyes, sometimes hesitant gestures as he looked at the people around him. Every step he takes, every sound from the street reminds him that whether he wants to or not, he is still a public figure and it is not easy to live a normal life. Jason's mood doesn't seem to be completely comfortable, although he really wants to enjoy a quiet moment with his wife and pets. As Jason and Emily Walker continue to walk on the sidewalk, the peaceful atmosphere of the neighborhood is suddenly disrupted by the noise of motorcycles. The two racers, with loud Harley-Davidsons, drove past and caused a commotion around the gas station. One of them, a man with a thick beard and a muscular build, turned his head and looked at them, then shouted rudely, "Those dogs look like brooms." His words rang out in the middle of space, like a malicious attack, making not only Jason but also Emily Walker feel surprised and uncomfortable. Jason immediately narrowed his eyes, feeling a sense of frustration rising in his heart. He tried to stay calm, but couldn't stop the anger that quietly flared up when he saw the smiling faces mocking their little dogs. Emily Walker, with a gentle nature and always looking to avoid conflict, looked at Jason, her eyes full of worry. She tightened the dogs' leashes as if to protect them from unnecessary offensive words. However, Jason couldn't help but feel frustrated. Those taunts are not only offensive to Dolly and Peggy, but also an invasion of their family's private space. Both small dogs were walking carefree, unaware of the roughness of the strangers around them. Jason's gaze became more and more tense, and he could not continue to ignore the provocations of those riders. Their words are not simply harmless jokes. They are like an infringement on his family's right to live in peace. Despite trying to stay calm, Jason still can't help but feel angry and fiercely protective of his wife and the animals he loves. As they continued to walk towards the gas station, the tension in the air grew higher and higher. Although Jason and Emily Walker tried to stay calm, the appearance of the two motorcycle racers out there still made the space heavy. As the whole family approached the store, they discovered that the two riders were still standing there, not only mocking, but also with a visibly defiant attitude. The teasing words did not stop, making the situation even more tense. One of the riders, with a beard and a contemptuous voice, continued to taunt the dogs, this time even getting closer, staring at Dolly and Peggy, causing both animals to feel tense. Jason couldn't stand and watch any longer. He felt the intrusion into his space, and even more felt the need to act. While Emily Walker gently pulled Jason's hand, his voice worried. "We should go back, it's not okay. Jason still maintained his determination to move forward. He understands that if they come back, this will only make the situation worse. However, the appearance of those people continues to put pressure. The motorcycles were still parked in place, and the shadows of people stood around as if they were watching their every gesture. As if noticing the tension in their every step, the two riders began to get closer, preventing them from approaching the store. "Surely you can't bring the dogs here," the big-mouthed biker growled, trying to get Jason and Emily Walker to step back. Jason took a deep breath, his hands clenched, and his eyes stared directly at the biker with a calm but resolute attitude. "There's no rule forbidding them from coming in here," he replied, his voice cold but firm. Both riders looked at each other, and then in a moment of hesitation, a biker suddenly realized who was standing in front of him. A marked change in their attitude when they realized Jason Statham was facing them. From there, the surrounding atmosphere immediately changed, but the tension still did not completely subside. When one of the riders recognized Jason Statham, the tense atmosphere immediately changed, but in the opposite direction. The biker suddenly stopped, his eyes wide open in surprise, and realized that the person in front of him was a famous star. "Wait," the biker said in a hesitant voice, then turned to his companion. "Do you notice? This is Jason Statham." Their attitude immediately changed, but not in a conciliatory way. The second biker, Vince, also raised his head, his eyes fixed on Jason, but instead of apologizing or backing down, he stepped closer, his tone of ridicule unabated. "Oh, is it really you? Jason Statham, right? Well, it's unbelievable, a big star walking with such small dogs." Vince smirked, not embarrassed, but on the contrary, continued to taunt and laugh at Dolly and Peggy's appearance. Each of his words was like a punch in Jason's patience, and the taunt only added to the tension in the air. Jason, while trying to stay calm, clearly couldn't contain his frustration. He looked directly at Vince, his eyes clearly showing anger, but still trying to keep his voice from getting out of tune. "Enough," Jason said, his voice cold and determined. "Don't think that because I'm a celebrity you can do what you want." But instead of stopping, Vince laughed even louder, looking amused when he saw Jason's displeasure. He even continued to taunt both the way Jason raised the dog and his words, making Jason even angrier. Things are no longer just a misunderstanding. It becomes a clear confrontation. Jason's taunts about his little dogs not only offended the love he had for them, but also raised a sense of injustice when he was belittled just because of his popularity. It felt like a fire burning in Jason's heart, and he knew that this confrontation couldn't stop there. Jason noticed the tension in the air was increasing. Despite trying to contain his emotions, as Vince got closer, seemingly wanting to touch Emily Walker and his dogs, Jason couldn't sit still. With a quick movement, he immediately stepped forward, blocking between Vince and Emily Walker. The feeling of protection for his wife and beloved dogs makes him not hesitate. "This is not going to happen," Jason said, his voice cold and determined. He looked directly at Vince, his eyes lit up with a clear determination, without the slightest fear or hesitation. Although Vince was taller and seemed aggressive, Jason didn't back down. He turned to look at Emily Walker, his eyes comforting but also protective, and then emphasized, "You and the dogs are not a target for anyone, especially them." With these words, it is not only clear that he is protecting his wife, but also declaring war on those who are disrespectful. Jason can't let this situation continue, because he knows that the respect and safety of his family is the most important thing. He stepped forward, his hands clenched and his body stiff, causing Vince and Tucker to pause for a moment, not knowing what to do next. At that time, his little dogs, Dolly and Peggy, were still innocently walking beside him, unaware of the tension between humans. However, the screeches and mocking laughter of the two riders made them even more worried. Jason bent down, stroking them comfortingly. "Don't worry, girls," he said softly, "I'll protect you." Everything now becomes a battle between Jason's determination and the defiant attitude of the others. He does not allow anyone to hurt the dogs he loves, nor does he allow them to overwhelm his family. After a tense confrontation with motorcycle racers, the air in the gas station became suffocatingly silent. Jason and Emily Walker walked in, trying to keep a calm appearance even though each of them was heavy in their hearts. Dolly and Peggy, their two little dogs, also seemed to sense the tense atmosphere. They were not as happy as usual, but quietly walked beside them, their ears drooping, their eyes worried. Jason knew that even though they had gone inside, what had just happened could not be easily faded. The two moved through the shelves in the small supermarket, the fluorescent lights twinkling but not enough to dispel the tension between them. Jason quietly chooses the necessary items, trying not to pay attention to the worries that surround him. He felt tired not because of the shopping trip, but because of what had just happened to the biker group. Emily Walker glanced at Jason from time to time, noticing his contemplative look, but she didn't know what to say to calm the air. She knew, in situations like this, it was only possible to make him feel safer by keeping quiet, giving him space to think. The two didn't say anything during their time at the store. Every step, every item on the shelf becomes a reminder of what they have just experienced. They are no longer an ordinary couple just going shopping, but now they are people who have just experienced a stressful, unexpected, and dangerous event. But even so, Jason still doesn't stop caring about Emily Walker and the dogs. He always walked beside her, keeping a certain distance from people he knew could cause more problems out there. When he arrived at the checkout counter, Jason noticed the cashier's eyes looking at him with confusion. He knew that what was happening out there was definitely being noticed. It feels like everything has become a part of public life that he can't get out of. But in this moment, the only thing he cares about is the safety of his family and finding some peace after a long, stressful day. When Jason and Emily Walker walked out of the store, the atmosphere outside was as heavy as it had been when they entered. Both of them felt the presence of motorcyclists, although they were no longer seen immediately. A curse echoed from behind, apparently from the driver named Tucker, who had been restrained by Jason earlier. "Damn mutts," roared Tucker, a heavy, angry curse, as one of their little dogs continued to bark and pull on the leash. "You ruined my boot," he continued, his anger still unsettled. Jason could hear every word he said, but he didn't look back. The feeling of anger wanted to flare up in his body, but he resolutely kept calm. His steadfastness was not because he didn't feel angry, but because he knew that if he reacted strongly, he could make the situation worse. In fact, what happened was stressful enough, and the only thing he could do now was protect his family, especially Emily Walker and the little dogs. He turned around, pulled her forward slightly, with his eyes still steadfast, not letting Tucker's provocation overwhelm him. Emily Walker sensed Jason's calmness, and although she was worried, she felt more secure. She knew that Jason was not easily angered, but his coldness at this time was his way of protecting his family. Jason continued to walk steadily, his eyes not leaving the riders who were standing a little distance away. However, instead of confronting him directly, he chose to remain silent, trying not to let himself get caught up in an unnecessary fight. Jason's feeling at this time is patience and self-control. The curses from Tucker, although annoying, could not shake his resolve. Jason knows that he is doing the right thing, standing his ground, and defending what matters most in his life. Although he couldn't change the attitude of those riders right away, he understood that patience, not responding to provocations, is the real victory in situations like this. When Jason walked into the group of racers club, the atmosphere inside was completely different from what he had imagined. All eyes in the large room fell on him, from the men sitting around to the people standing outside the door, all surprised to see Jason Statham, the famous action star. Whispers and whispers spread everywhere, but Jason remained calm, his sharp eyes observing his surroundings, remembering every detail. He didn't come here to fight these people, but to solve a problem. Led by Nero, a member of the club, Jason is led deeper inside, where he faces Tucker and Vince, the two drivers who had mocked his family earlier. The two did not show any remorse, on the contrary. Their expressions were still full of stubbornness and resentment. Facing them, Jason did not appear confused or angry, but just looked them in the eyes, and his voice was calm but resolute. "I have come to settle this misunderstanding and let you know that your behavior today is unacceptable." Tucker, though still unyielding, began to justify his actions. He thought it was just a joke, a lesson to teach Jason about not being able to disturb their group of riders. Vince stood next to him and nodded, agreeing, but still felt the change in the atmosphere. Jason didn't lose his temper, he just calmly replied, "You may think it's a joke, but when you insult my dogs, you go too far." At that moment Pri, the head of the club, walked out, his eyes solemn. He listened to what Jason had to say, and then turned to look at Tucker and Vince with dissatisfied expressions. "You're right, Jason," Pri said, his voice hard. "We have rules and respect for each other. You have violated the principles of this club. And now, you're going to pay the price." Tucker and Vince were stunned when Pri ordered their rings to be stripped, a sign of punishment. Their faces turned pale, not believing what was happening. They had always considered the club to be a safe place where they could do whatever they wanted, but now they realized that their behavior was not only a violation of ethics, but also a bad image for the club. When Pri handed their rings to Jason, he just nodded, not overly excited or satisfied. He just wanted to end it peacefully. The atmosphere in the club gradually becomes softer as the others realize that the matter has been resolved. The members began to open up, and a few people walked up to Jason, starting to talk to him about his films and the actions in his films. Jason, though a little nervous, also gave a slight smile. Suddenly, Nero approached, smiled and said, "Mr. Statham, we are not just motorists. A lot of us are pet lovers. We even organize charity events for animals." These words made Jason feel partly relieved. Although the incident was stressful at first, he also found that sometimes unexpected situations can open up opportunities to connect and build community. When he walked out of the club, Jason felt that he had not only protected his family and the dogs, but also indirectly made a small change in this community. He realized that sometimes confronting and solving problems in a mature manner can yield better results than he expected. When Jason walked out of the club, he felt a profound change in the air. The previous tensions seemed to have dissipated, replaced by a lighter, more pleasant space. Everyone, from the riders to the club members, now seems friendlier. Pri stood next to Jason, smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "Thank you for staying calm and handling things this way," Pri said respectfully. Jason nodded and replied softly, "Everything can be solved if we face each other honestly." While the initial incident may have led to conflict, the way Jason dealt with the problem caused not only Tucker and Vince, but also the people at the club, to reconsider their attitude. Some of the riders, who may have previously considered Jason an outsider, are now starting to talk to him, asking about his work and personal interests. Stories of vehicles and animals are gradually shared, creating an unexpected connection space where people are no longer differentiated and can find common ground. What's special is that the club is not only a place to show strength and challenge yourself, but now it has become a more cohesive community where people can share simple things like love for pets or memories of family. This event, although it started as a conflict, became an opportunity for all to change, learn and integrate together. Jason, when he left, felt relieved and satisfied with the unexpected result. He realized that sometimes it is not always necessary to win an argument or confrontation, but that maintaining calm and listening can open new doors, leading to deeper understanding and connection. On the way home, Jason looked into the distance, where the dim street lights flickered, feeling that life, despite its challenging times, always opens up opportunities to change and renew himself.